Hello, hello.
Welcome. Hi, how's it going?
It's going good for the end of the day, I must say. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here too. Um, yeah, welcome everyone. Great to have everyone here. Um, and so, yeah, what's new with you, Tim?
Oh, just trying to get through the latest information from the field in Gaza, as well as getting some work done, and the degrowth international degrowth conference is this week. So I've been stopping by and listening to a couple of talks when I can. They're all recorded, so I can get back to them later. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's exciting to
yeah.
see real time something budding, something that's so important.
mm.
Um, yeah, how's your day going?
My day has been busy. I've been obsessively working on communications things. And so it's been very, very focused. And I've been working on like public narrative stuff. So like um, thinking about like the campaign finance reform movement and of us in the campaign finance reform and how I can kind of like uh, shorten a story about that. Um, and and so of our movement. And so that was kind of an exciting thing that I've been doing. But I was about what you'd been talking about degrowth. So we thought for a start in the show today that we would just um, talk about improvisationally a degrowth topic, and that we kind of take that in and ask a few curious questions. And I'd even come up with like, I'd try to think of like the most challenging question about growth that I can think of right now. So for however well I'll be able to do that, but maybe if the audience thinks of something, you can think of a good challenge question too. So we're all in this together, and we're going to start off by just letting Tim talk, and we'll and share what we notice. So feel free to share all the things you notice about Tim and use the chat as your own very personal notepad. Go ahead, Tim. Tell us about degrowth.
Okay, well, in economics, which I started looking at 2 years ago when I heard that the climate emergency is just a symptom of our unhealthy economic system, I asked, what's unhealthy about our economic system? I don't even know anything about economics. Well, it turns out that every politician and well, most politicians and every corporation wants strives for has a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and representatives for economic growth. And that sounds good. Children grow up, plants grow. We think of grow as a harmless thing and quite natural. However, the thing about economic growth is they want it every year at a rate of 2 or 3% of GDP growth. And GDP is the gross domestic product, which is a metric for for all the goods and services that we can produce in a year. It's just one very narrowly
Okay,
defined metric.
so let me see if I can reflect what we've heard so far back a little bit. And people in the audience, feel free to share what you're noticing. So to it if you want to. But what I'm noticing is that you're talking about this requirement in the system to have measurable growth. Um, so that's like the quarterly dividend, and that growth is required, mandated. Otherwise, you're considered a failure. And so then you were talking about gross domestic product as an example of one of those measurements.
That's right. it's it's such a narrowly defined metric that
Mm-hmm.
the inventor of the metric, Simon Kuznets, in
Mm-hmm.
the 30s, when Congress asked this economist named Simon Kuznets to to come up with a way that we can avoid the Great Depression again, he came back with gross domestic product as a sort of snapshot of how we're doing in on the production side of the economy. But at the end of his definition and presentation, he said, "Whatever you do, don't let this be a measure of human welfare or well-being, because it'll be the end of you."
Mm.
And at first, they took it into consideration, but then after World War II, it became the gold standard, and we've been talking about nothing else since. And the interesting thing is, there's about 40 countries that have half of the GDP as the United States, and they beat us in all of the human well-being, wellness factors, what makes life worth living, uh, measurements.
So
And
you're saying, let me see if I can reflect this back a little bit. So you're saying that just because the United States, that we have a high GDP, doesn't mean we're very happy or satisfied. That perhaps a nation that might have a lower GDP, but that looks after people and has a higher quality of life and has more high quality long-term relationships, uh, might result in more life satisfaction. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I didn't say all that, but you've kind of brought it full circle, because that's basically it. When the economists and the GDP growth is allowed to dominate the conversation, you end up, I mean, what it goes hand in hand with is this neoliberal free market trickle down. What's good for the economy and what's good for growth will benefit everybody. But in fact, what we're seeing is the opposite. The difference between who it benefits, the owners of the corporations, and the people who are given lots of money by the corporations to represent their special interests in government, it's just led to a wide gap between people who can make a living, can sort of survive in this hyper consumer society that is sort of like, it's become a hungry ghost that can never have enough growth, and it's basically struggling to just keep up this idea of growth.
So what I'm hearing you say is that this this notion of growth, it becomes something that maybe struggles to keep its own ideal. And there's something in it where it's lost maybe its purpose. You said a hungry ghost. And so I thought when you said a hungry ghost, kind of like something that's lingering around after its own death, uh, still trying to find the meaning that it was created for. Um, and I'm noticing that uh, Kevin says, interesting what is being said. Uh, he goes on to say, wondering how this came to be. Um, and as we're, yeah, so that's a good puzzle. How this system, the prevailing system that we live under, came to be. And maybe this is a good learning topic. And Kevin says Buddhist phrases hungry ghost.
That's exactly right. It's become a pissing match between the global political world powers during the Cold War, coming out of World War II, because the U.S. dominated World War II, and they went into World War II having tallied up their GDP. Like, that's the first thing they asked themselves if they wanted to join the wars: can we afford to win? Do we have the the production capacity to basically arm all of our soldiers and send everybody around the world in these different theaters of warfare? And yeah, it's because we won so well. We basically have this narrative that we tell ourselves that the democracy and freedom is good. We're fighting for that reputation around the world against, um, communism and Marxism and any threats to democracy. And I've got one example in the 60s when Kennedy was arguing against GDP. He said, basically, GDP measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile.
Mm.
And yeah,
Yeah,
we
so
have,
that's from John F. Kennedy.
yeah. So it's been like an ongoing struggle of like, what kind of people, what kind of community, what kind of nation do we want? And the countries that have not been focused on GDP have things that, like institutional welfare states that have safety nets and are meeting people's basic human needs. But we call that all kinds of bad names, and it's like morally reprehensible that government would step in and limit our freedoms. There's this whole narrative that we're sort of stuck in this country. We can't get there from here, because as soon as you talk about reorganizing the economy to meet human needs fairly, and most importantly, for the first time in like this whole argument in the last decade or two, planetary boundaries has become more focused in the degrowth argument, because it's unlimited growth on a finite planet, and this kind of endless hegemony, military backed around the world, that everybody's got to bend their will for a Western type style economics. We're basically chewing through the planet's ability to absorb waste, where we're externalizing the real cost of doing business. And because GDP never measured any social costs or environmental costs, that is sort of the crux of why I'm passionate about degrowth, and why I try to talk about it as much as possible.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that because GDP doesn't measure quality of life and other things besides growth, that it ends up hurting and destroying the world. And
Yeah.
And that this is that you believe that this is the trap that we're trapped in, and this becomes one of the great challenges of our time that we have to try to unlock. And so now, so now let's see. Okay, so now let me ask a question here, and then what we'll do, and after this, we've got some more stuff planned for everybody. I think a lot of you know what it might be, but after this, we're going to be doing a little bit of learning, some debate learning, both from Mehdi Hassan's book, whenever argument being interviewed at the Free Library of Philadelphia. And there's a couple points that he makes, and we're going to try to explore some of those. And we're also going to look at two of the recent debates that in on the debate question of is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? So we'll be looking at those today. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. And let's try a question here now. So, okay, so I hear you saying that we have got trapped in this cycle of needing to grow, but then the world in the process. But then the question becomes, well, what do you do in order to prevent degrowth, or to prevent growth, or to stop this cycle? How do you stop this massive engine that's moving at such a massive rate, and de-escalate from that without destroying everybody or destroying many people? Wouldn't that pose certain danger? And that's my challenge question for this lightning conversation.
That's a great question. I've heard it said that we should flip the argument of focus on economic growth to solve all of the trickle down social benefits that growth has brought us over the centuries, from the Industrial Revolution to the modern world that we enjoy now. And the flip side is, why don't we just go straight to taking care of people directly as a policy? And there are many, many ways we can do that. And I think the ecological economists have run the numbers, and they've figured out, they've got robust economic models that actually take into account the planetary boundaries and human social welfare. And they say there is enough for everybody, but we have to start thinking in terms of sufficiency. And we're going to be a little less rich as a society if we go down this path. But the good news is there'll be a public abundance for everybody, and we'll get to keep a livable planet. Not a bad deal. And nobody gets hurt.
Now, as we're saying this, now I know this is just a lightning conversation. Are there some links you could share in the chat too?
Sure.
For folks? And if folks find this interesting, share in the chat that you find this interesting, because next week, this could be something we're talking about. This could be a topic that we talk about next week. And if you see links that are interesting, or you see other points of view that you want us to consider, to challenge this with, please feel free to fill out. I'm going to share this. I want to talk just very briefly now. Thanks so much, Tim. Does anybody from the audience have any questions, by the way, about this? Are there any questions anybody has for Tim very quickly? But I'm going to share with folks in the chat as well a link. And the link is of a Google form. I'm going to show it to you very briefly here. This is a form that we actually, let me just preview this. You can come in here, and we use this every week. And you can let us know in a timestamp, in a summary, in a link, what learning resources we should use. And you can pick different things and share your preferences. So if you want us to look at, for instance, John Mearsheimer or you want us to look at Rula Jabril and Jason Stanley, you can let us know and check off these boxes, or you can suggest something else. So with that, next up, we have been following the debate around the Gaza war. Tim, do you want to say anything about what's inspired you in this, and a little bit about the story of how you got interested in this debate and where it all started?
Yeah, sure. Which debate are you talking about?
The monk debate, and just starting from there a little bit. I guess we could, if we wanted to, maybe we should take a little bit of the monk debate, and then maybe we could go into the Mehdi Hassan win every argument piece for a little bit, and then maybe think about what else we want to do.
Sure.
Sound good to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there on the monk debate that you wanted to share too, that we could start off with? Just think about that as you're introducing this.
Okay. Should I share screen? And
yeah, go ahead.
By the way, I shared 4 intro links on degrowth and eco-socialism, and those are in the chat. And yeah, feel free to jump on those. Those are in the order that I discovered them, and I feel like they get you caught up with the debates. And the first one is Jason Hickel, as he talks about GDP and why the myth of growth is killing us. And the last one is a debate where he really unpacks that against 2 capitalists from different backgrounds, and they yeah, so it's a good. But the whole story of Palestine and the conflict over there that everybody says, well, the mainstream news says started on October 7th and it's all Hamas's fault, it really plays out in this debate. And I'll just pull a few minutes of each side of it. But to me, it's like
that seems. Yeah.
This is so helpful in terms of.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no,
yeah, it's just nice to ground the whole Palestine context into a debate by really good debaters. I mean, they're solid, and they're bringing all these arguments, and it's overwhelming sometimes. And the problem with this debate is it's pay-per-view. So I bought it $25 to watch it, and I think I can also watch their whole library of debates. So I'm good for a year. It's $25 for a year. So if you're into learning about debates, it's a good investment. And yeah, but I'll just share screen, I guess. And
wonderful, yeah. And while you're getting your screen up, I'm just going to share this very too. I just want to share here. This is our website. This is codewhatever.us, and on our website we've got links to our events and stuff that you can sign up on. So feel free to come by here. We have computer programming lessons every week. We also stream about computer programming and human rights and pitch-in. You can bring your wonderful ideas here, and let's talk about them. Let's share wonderful ideas. And finally, if you enjoy what you see here, you can also support us. We're a 501c3, and you can donate to us on our GoFundMe. All donations are tax deductible in the United States. And whenever you're ready, Tim, just be my guest.
Okay, thank you for going over some of these really important issues. And if I hit present here, will that work? Share screen. I want to make sure I get the right tab, right? Where is it?
And yeah, as we're waiting right now, folks, feel free to share anything you noticed from tonight or anything that stands out to you.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Hopefully you can hear. Let me.
All right, let's take
real
Can you hear?
tolerated form of
Yes.
anti-Semitism.
Okay. And let me make sure I've got, this is Douglas Murray. He is a really good debater. He's been on this Monk debate stage before, and he and his debate partner Natasha have proposed that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism, and that we should vote for this resolution that equates them as one and the same.
Yeah, so they're saying that anti-Semitism is no different from anti-Semitism. And
Right.
as we go into this, I just want to invite everybody to share what you notice.
Okay, so here we go. Just a couple of minutes from the pro argument, the pro proposal side.
And yeah, just
and then
put
we'll
what you
hear from
notice.
the other side.
Put details you notice, facts, how you feel, whatever is present while we're watching in the chat, if you like.
Is anti-Zionism. Zionism, as we just heard, is simply the right of the Jews to self-determination in their historic homeland. That's all. Anti-Semitism, as we've also just heard, is double standards against Jewish people or cruel and unfair treatment of people because they're Jews. This isn't very far away from home here. If this isn't anti-Semitism, can the audience here tell me why the following things have happened since October the 7th? Why in a Montreal suburb a synagogue should be firebombed, as happened in November? Why there should have been gunshots against the yeshiva? Why in Toronto a bookstore owned by a Jew should be attacked? Why a Molotov cocktail was thrown through a Jewish community center in Montreal? Why a Toronto Jewish deli in North York was firebombed? Why in Toronto the Orthodox synagogue was vandalized? Why in Toronto 2 men opened fire the other week on a Jewish girls' school? If it isn't anti-Semitism, tell me why just a week ago pro-Hamas protesters tried to go through Jewish areas in this city shouting not just Allahu Akbar, but, and I quote, sorry for the language, fucking filthy fucking Zionist pigs, dirty Zionist rats. Have you heard that language before? The Jews have. Now look, if you are interested in this motion, just bear this in mind. It's not about Netanyahu, it's not about this war, it's about double standards. And one question hovers over it above all, the question of who would protect the Jews. Who would you trust to protect them? The Europeans? The Arab world? No. History shows only one people will protect the Jewish people. The Jewish people. That's what Zionism is. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll just jump over to the other end of the debate, the alternative. I think I've got it right here.
And I'm noticing from the audience that Kevin says, noticed he was unconvincing.
Right. Hang on. Yeah, I want to talk about that too, but I guess we'll just a couple minutes from the other side, and then we can maybe
I guess we could. If anybody wants to share anything you noticed, or write it down and put it in the chat right now before as you're queuing up the next one. Now's a great time to put anything you noticed from the last one in the chat before you start the next one. Anything from anyone? All right, I guess you can go.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay, I can wait.
No, I think you're good.
It's tempting to put some things in the chat, but I'll wait. Now I got to get back to that screen. How do I do that? Here it is. Yeah, okay. Ready?
Zionist here, and still vote against this motion with a clear conscience. Still vote with our side, the right side. Because this motion is not about whether you are pro-Israel or pro-Zionist. It's about whether the rest of us have the right, the freedom to take a different view on Israel, on Zionism, on Benjamin Netanyahu even, without being silenced, without being told we're racists. We're not. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. I'll tell you 3 reasons why. 3 reasons why you should oppose this motion tonight. Number 1, if you vote for this motion tonight, you are throwing logic, history, and the English language under the bus. Because anti-Semitism is hating Jews, the people, and Judaism, the religion. Anti-Zionism is opposing Israel, the state, and Zionism, the ethno-nationalist ideology that underpins that state. Zionism is not Judaism. Let me say that again for the people up top. Zionism is not Judaism, right? It's a very modern, secular, political ideology movement that was founded less than 150 years ago by an atheist named Theodor Herzl, who said, and I quote, "The anti-Semites will be our most dependable friends, the anti-Semitic countries, our allies." His words, not mine. Number 2, if you vote for this motion, you're throwing Palestinians as a people under the bus. You're telling an occupied people, a dispossessed people, to accept their own occupation, their own dispossession, meekly, in silence. Otherwise, they're racists. As my friend Yusuf Manaya, the Palestinian-American activist, says, to ask Palestinians not to be anti-Zionist is to ask Palestinians not to be. And number 3, last but not least, if you vote for this motion, you're throwing a lot of Jews under the bus as well. Not just Jews like Edwin Samuel Montagu, but Jews today. If you vote for this motion tonight, you're saying my debate partner, Gideon Levy, whose grandparents were killed in the Holocaust, who served for Shimon Peres, who's written for Haaretz for over 40 years, just won Israel's top journalism prize 3 years ago. He's an anti-Semite. You're saying the Satmar, the world's biggest Hasidic Jewish sect, which says it is fighting God's war against Zionism, is anti-Semitic. You're saying Jewish college students on campus, maybe some of them are your kids, members of If Not Now and Jewish Voices for Peace, they're anti-Semites. You're saying some of the most respected Jewish voices in the world, like Avraham Berg, the former Speaker of the Parliament, Miriam Margolis, the actress from Harry Bloody Potter, they're all anti-Semites. That is what you're saying. That is what you're signing off on if you vote for this motion tonight. So I have a simple solution for you all. Don't do it.
Yeah, what are folks noticing? I see Kevin's got some remarks. He added, noticed right away I agree with him. And
why is that?
So am I really listening? Well, that's an interesting point, right? Do you have to challenge yourself to listen more closely? How do you challenge yourself to listen more closely? What so for Kevin, you agree with him. What is it that you agree with him about? And what was unconvincing about the first speaker for you? And also, while Kevin's getting back on that, what are you noticing, Tim? What did you notice?
I feel like there's a missing of each other's arguments. I feel like I'm listening to people just talk over each other, because Douglas says one thing and Mehdi says something else, because it's like the definition of Zionism. I get that Zionism started in the 1890s by Theodor Herzl, and it was about forming a state. But now that there's a state of Israel, what is Zionism? And I feel like the pro argument, Douglas, is saying that Zionism is a belief in a state. And if you're anti-Zionism, you want to wipe out that state. And I feel like he's equating. I mean, Mehdi, I feel like I'm just gravitated towards what Mehdi's argument was, which was Zionism is a political like philosophy about forming a state, and it's separate than the actual country as a state itself, like the physical government of Israel, and that it's okay to be against a government. You're not racist if you're against a policy or a behavior of a particular ruling sort of government within Israel. But I feel like, the audience in this debate has been surveyed before and after the debate, and they were 60% for this argument that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. And then after the debate, they were even more. They went up by 5%. Now they're like 2/3 of that whole theater is for the debate. And I'm just like, this does not make sense. Maybe it just is very disorienting. So I'm looking forward to help from you all. And there's so much more to listen to. I'm sorry, and you're muted.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So for you, it's almost dismaying in a sense, because you can't see how the how you can criticize the state of Israel without risking being accused of being anti-Semitic under these terms. Would that be fair? Or
Totally. That's the way I see it. It's like they're just shutting down a healthy debate that we need to be having. They don't want to talk about it. They just call it racist anti-Semitism. When in fact, this whole apartheid state at the West Bank and the Gaza being the biggest sort of concentration camp in modern history is like exactly what they're arguing against on the pro-argument side. So it's very surreal that they could be doing one thing, and like Mehdi said, if you vote for the pro argument, you're sort of throwing history under the bus. You're ignoring language, and it's just mind blowing. But it could just be me. I need to watch this thing a few more times.
well, yeah, it's an interesting debate, and let's go back to some of the arguments that have been made, right? Because I haven't heard a ton of specifics yet about Mehdi. So Mehdi's arguing that if you argue this, that then you're arguing that people like Jewish Voice for Peace are anti-Semitic, and you start arguing a lot of cases of people being anti-Semitic. I heard Mehdi bring up Theodore Herzl talking about the Jewish state having anti-Semitic allies, or that the allies would be likely to be anti-Semitic, which is interesting to hear Theodore Herzl say that. And I'm also noticing that Kevin said a little bit here before he was saying, I'm really listening to Mehdi Hassan, and he said, so I have prejudices based on my friend from Palestine and a Zionist that is antagonizing him. Mm-hmm. And he says, I side with the oppressed Irish upbringing.
I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah. So, okay. So there was also what was said by the person debating Mehdi, who was saying that part of anti-Semitism is treating Jewish people differently than other people, and by denying a Jewish state, therefore you're insulting the Jewish people. And so that was kind of an interesting argument that he organized in all this.
Yeah, it seemed like there was some confusing of the violence against Jews in Canada because the monk debate is in Canada and Toronto, and so the context was Canadian, and they were saying basically that all these horrible things are happening to Jewish Canadians in the last few months since the conflict broke out, and they're using that like they're claiming the mantle of victimhood for basically arguing for a kind of authoritarian concept of like there will be no talking badly against the state of Israel. Like we would never allow that in the United States, or we would never. Yeah, it would be like the end of living in a democracy.
You mean the punitive dimension of this, the fact that if you say something, then you get punished for it. And I want to point out, Kevin said, connection to American hegemony.
How so? What's the connection that we would just squash the dissenters? Like anybody who's
I don't know. We'll see what Kevin says. Okay. So do we want to look at any more clips from this, or maybe we want to pivot now to look at maybe the Gallup section?
Oh yeah.
Do we want to go to the Gish Gallup section a little bit and pivot to that, and then oh, I see. Kevin's saying, look at all the genocide we're responsible for.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, this is like a modern version of colonialism. But what's really interesting, if you watch this debate, there are moments where they are arguing that Israel is the most decolonial acts in history because it rose up against colonialism in the Arab world, and it was really mind blowing because I've been equating Zionism with settler colonialism because they keep settling and taking land and clearing population. I mean, that's the Palestine story for the last 120 years. So.
Also, people like David Ben-Gurion have identified with colonialism too.
They took their notes from the post-construction South in the United States. What's it called?
You mean the Reconstruction?
Deconstruction?
The Reconstruction?
Reconstruction, yeah. Like, they abolished slavery, but then they reconstructed it through apartheid laws.
Well, the Reconstruction doesn't refer to reconstructing slavery. It refers to the fact that for a while they were rebuilding everything. Like for instance, the Poor People's Campaign talks about a third Reconstruction, and they were actually making a lot of investment to rebuild everything after the war. If Lincoln had lived, there was actually a plan for a very grand Reconstruction that would have made the South the equal of the North and would have freed everyone. Of course, Lincoln didn't live to do that, but it was kind of like the first New Deal, in a sense. It was supposed to, and so Reconstruction, and in that period, that was one of the only periods in history where, before the Civil Rights Movement, where Black people actually did have the right to vote, and Black senators were getting elected, and Black representatives and members of Congress were getting elected. It wasn't until Rutherford B. Hayes that they legitimized Jim Crow and restricted the right to vote for Black people and started pulling that back.
Yeah, and
even as inadequate as that was.
Oh yeah. So I thank you for pointing that out.
So yeah,
I'd always equated Jim Crow South with deconstruction policies and apartheid.
It came on the tail of that. It was a response to, because there was this sense that you had to try to end slavery and do something about it. But it didn't go far enough, and it wasn't thorough. You know, it's very often, we've seen lots of examples where this country does something that's working. Like, for instance, LBJ, desegregated so many desegregated federal jobs. And it was that by the time Reagan was president, Black people were starting to get closer, as close as they'd ever gotten at that point, to equalizing things with white folk economically. There was actually a period where they were starting to approach where white folks were at economically, and Reagan killed all those federal jobs, and it seemed very intentionally, right? He killed all those federal jobs, and so that ended all that economic stimulus. And Kevin says, we still have slavery, the prison system. That's right. So, yeah, let's take a look at this this debate. Did we want to start at the Gish Gallop? Was that
Sure.
a good idea?
Yep.
All right, and I'm going to play this, and I want anybody who's in the audience just to share, what do you notice? And we'll talk about this.
Thank you very much for your talk. It's very inspirational. I really appreciate it very much. The question that I have is, the point earlier, Donald Trump basically coming machine gun style with, just so much ammunition. Whereas in the past, when a lie was something to be embarrassed about or something to be, explained, I mean, there's really none of that. I mean, it's just machine gun style. There's 10 things, and when you try to fact check or to fight them, you get 25 more. It's like a hydra that another head grows. I guess the point is that it seems to me that the proper retaliation would be to somehow rebuke some of that, but then you don't want to play defense all the time, because then that other person owns the argument.
Agreed, 100%. And I say that in the book. What you don't want to do in a debate is be on the defensive. You want to put your opponent on the back foot. And when I talk about the Gish Galloper, this is a phrase that's used in debate circles. It's named after a guy called Dwayne Gish, who was a Christian creationist who used to debate evolutionary biologists. You can go and watch him on YouTube. And he would win these debates, even though these people were eminently qualified, knew the science inside out. But, with the greatest respect, most scientists are not great public speakers, haven't really been trained in that way. So they, the evolutionary biologist turns up with 17 peer-reviewed studies. The audience doesn't care about that. Dwayne Gish would turn up with humor, an anecdote, and then he would do the machine gun style of throwing a bunch of cherry-picked quote, distorted statistics, fake studies, a blizzard to which the scientists couldn't respond in detail. And the audience might think, well, scientists didn't respond to everything that Gish said. Maybe Gish has got a point.
Right.
And Donald Trump has either knowingly or unknowingly borrowed that style where you just go rat-a-tat-tat, one lie after another, and the person at home doesn't know what to think. And I say in the book, look, there's no silver bullet to stopping this stuff. I mean, this stuff is done deliberately. Let's be clear. This is not an accident. Steve Bannon, don't take my word for it. Steve Bannon famously said in an interview with Michael Lewis, our opponents are not the Democratic Party. Our opponents are the media. And the way you deal with the media is to flood the zone with shit. That was his phrase. And that's what they've done. They flooded the zone. And Trump does this so well. And I say in the book, look, there's a three-part strategy that I advise in the book that my fellow interviewers, journalists, people hosting debates, politicians should do to try and stop it. Number one, pick your battle. Donald Trump throws 100 lies at you, forget 99 of them. Yeah. Pick one. Pick the most ridiculous, dumbest, most outrageous lie and rebut that, mock that, ridicule that, highlight that. So that the audience is like, well, if that's one of them, maybe I shouldn't trust the rest. That's number one. Number two, don't budge. This is the bane of my life as someone who doesn't watch these interviews. You've seen it on TV. Politician says some nonsense. Interviewer goes to the next question.
We're trained.
Follow up.
Yeah.
Do the follow-up question. Don't just move on to the next subject. And a lot of interviews in this country, I get it. I'm on cable news on Sunday nights. You got to go to ad break. You've got time constraints. You want to ask 7 different topics because they're all in the news. You've got a member of Congress that I have to ask about and education and the economy and COVID. I say less is more. Don't ask a couple of questions, get answer to those questions. I interviewed a guy called Steve Rogers, a Trump advisor in 2018, sadly not Captain America. And he just would not accept that Trump was lying about steel mills. Trump had said there were 6 new steel mills that had been announced by U.S. Steel. And I said, no.
It's amazing. Pinned on his Twitter account. Make sure you watch
it. And I said, but Trump did. But U.S. Steel said there were no steel mills. I'm like, he meant there's more steel. I said, no, that's not what he said. He said 6 steel mills. Where are they? No. What he meant is manufacturing. But where are the 6 steel mills? Trump said 6 steel mills. He said that steel is doing better. No, he said 6 steel mills. So I kept going. He wasn't used to. He's used to the interviewer say, okay, let's talk about something else now.
Yeah.
At one point, he says, just move on. Are you producing me now? I'm like, no. And that's where I did step 3. Step 3 is you call it out. I said to Rogers, you want me to move on because you know it's a lie and you've got no response. You got to call out what's going on. You got to take a step back, big picture. If somebody is gaslighting and BSing and gish galloping in front of an audience, tell the audience what's going on. Let them know that this is not about true or false. This is about disorientation. This is about trying to confuse you. That's what authoritarians do. That's what fascists do. To undermine the media, undermine reality, undermine fact-based arguments.
Exactly.
So pick your battle, don't budge, call it out. Those are the best options of it. None of them are perfect, but it's what we've got when we're faced with this army of gish gallopers coming towards us.
Yeah, so what are folks noticing? I see Kevin says, have we taught citizens critical thinking? What you're saying with the Gish Gallop, that like a lot of people aren't using critical thinking? And Tim says, exactly, undermining reality. I experienced the monk debate. Was there a specific part in the monk debate that stood out to you around that? Of undermining reality?
So many. I mean, I've been watching this thing unfold for 8 months, and what I heard from the side that was for the argument that anti-Zionism was anti-Semitism was just amazing. Like specifics. Well, I mean, I mentioned one about how Israel was the most decolonial country to happen in the Middle East or in the modern world. It's like, wow,
right?
That was a big one. And the point that that they made about the precision of Israeli Defense Forces bombings and how they're very careful not to hurt civilians was just mind-blowing. It's like
that's a very
only if you're watching mainstream media, maybe that's just showing like very little of what's actually happening. I mean, they've bombed all the hospitals except for maybe one. All the universities have been destroyed. I mean, they're literally it's collateral damage. And
so let's think. So thinking about this, right? Because it can be really easy when talking about a Gish Gallop to kind of get lost in the bigness of it. And you were talking about how this debate, there's a lot in the debate that makes it hard to want to respond, which is kind of what the Gish Gallop is doing.
Yeah, and I felt like if we were analyzing what was said, like we've started to do with Rich McCormick, U.S. representative from Georgia, which we got that clip. I think I put it in the chat. we could break down and fact check a lot of what they were saying and just let people decide, who's telling the truth. But because there was so much of it, I feel like the audience was just bowed over with the sort of that false narrative, because they've been indoctrinated into it. They've been brainwashed, and that's the thing. The public narrative is controlled so much in this country, and apparently all around the Western Hemisphere, that you can't have this debate without reality being warped. And I only say that as somebody who's been following social media from the field, from Gaza, from the West Bank, for 8 months, because I just can't believe that our president is sending weapons and money to Israel to defend themselves when they're a world superpower, oppressing poor people who have like the lowest GDP, speaking of GDP, on the planet, because of their situation about being oppressed and being held captive. And they can't get water, they can't get supplies. It's just atrocious, and but nobody knows about it, and it's been going on for decades. And the stories that we tell ourselves, and the same can be true with the economics stories that we tell ourselves, as well as the climate situation. We are totally brainwashed. But we have our better stories. They're coming around. A lot of people are working on them. And I think it's just a matter of time when people get fed up and they know better, and they demand, I feel like we're going to have to not be lazy and just receive the bad, unhealthy stories. We're going to have to go out and find for ourselves what is the truth.
That is critical, right? Like, it's not enough to take the truth as a received thing, but we have to be able to find it for ourselves. Otherwise, when we have to do the work ourselves, we may not know what to do.
It's the scariest thing.
I want to keep us a little, I want to keep us a little focused though too. I see Kevin saying 100%, absolutely, and yes. And I want to put this clip up of Representative McCormick and of Tim. Speaking to him. Yeah, this is kind of a classic clip here. I'm going to roll it back now, beginning, and share. Oh wait, that's the other one.
Whoops.
There we go. All right. I'm going to play this. And as we go through this, and Kevin says more Bernie Sanders, as we go through this, feel free to share what you're noticing. And as you're going through this, are there any puzzles that you're picking up on as you go too? What are you noticing? Are there any puzzles? Maybe even feel free to share with what you agree with and what you disagree with. But let's start with what you notice.
Looking for Raleigh, North Carolina, Independent Line. Tim, good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I have a comment and a question for Congressman McCormick. My comment is, since GDP does not account for ecological or social negatives, such as air pollution, like greenhouse gases, why is it that no matter Republican or Democrat, everybody wants unlimited economic growth on a finite planet that is driving the climate emergency? Could you please explain how we are going to, without a habitable planet? I think we're on track for hitting 2 degrees Celsius by the middle of next decade. So let's conserve life on the planet, please. Yeah. What do you say?
So my dad was a forest ranger. I'm a conservationist like Teddy Roosevelt. I want to see the planet survive. But let's have a realistic conversation there's always going to be an emergency, whether it be a war or climate change or whatever you want to call it. Actually, there's a really good book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks about the Federal Reserve, how it was created, what kind of things we use as emergencies to grow the budget, to spend more than we should. This climate change idea, which has kind of become a religion, has been used as an excuse to overspend dramatically, where you can spend dollars on greenhouse gases. And let's see how that's worked, by the way. Since you want to talk about greenhouse, let's have a realistic conversation about why the Earth is warming. I would state that your greenhouse gases, which you're talking about, carbon dioxide, methane makes up 0.0007% of the entire atmosphere. Now you're going to eliminate and all the animals and everything else that produce methane, including ourselves. Is that your solution to tackling 0.0007% of the atmosphere? Or is it the carbon dioxide, which produces, I think it constitutes of 0.04% of the entire environment? 11% of that is from humans, by the way. And from that, 14% of that in the United States. And from that, 29% from all of our automobiles, all of our planes, all of our trains, all of our ships. So if you want to eliminate all the stuff that the United States produces by spending $1 trillion in debt and ruin our economy, and then we can control everything that's going on, and we'll lose our influence in the world, by the way. And we're one of the cleanest energy producers in the world, by the way. But just all that, just to reduce the carbon emissions by 0.000167% of the atmosphere, you think that's going to actually affect global warming? When you can actually look in the entire solar system right now, the other planets are warming too. Why is that? Is it the cars? Is it the carbon dioxide? Is it the methane? Of course not. Maybe we're having a solar flare. Maybe it's something, but I think you're putting all your eggs in the wrong basket. I don't disagree that there's climate change, but don't think that it's because of carbon emissions.
Yeah. So Kevin says, noticed an elected politician doesn't know any science, and says, noticing Tim doing an excellent job. Yeah, what was it, Kevin, for you specifically that stuck out to you in what Tim said? And what was one thing Tim said that stuck out to you? And thing that Congressman McCormick said. One thing I noticed, and we've talked about this a bit, is how he's talking about how small the numbers are, but there's not any size of like proportionality in it. That he says, this is such a small number. What difference does this make? He asked a reasonable, important question. You're talking about Tim. Yeah.
I'm going to keep asking that question to our government representatives until somebody answers it, because nobody's talking about it. And I am headed to trial for a climate protest just to get us to talk about it. And right now, they're gish galloping. So, they're really breaking the social contract with their citizens when they are failing miserably to tackle this pending risk that we're all facing. It's the biggest crime in our human story to be ignoring the scientists, to keep the whole capitalist system floating from crashing.
Yeah, I heard him say we'll lose our influence in the world if we don't pursue GDP.
That's in a world that they have fabricated, where we have enemies over ideologies like to have freedom and democracy or not. When actually, if we want to talk about democracy, let's ask what is popular amongst people across party lines. They're so busy dividing us and getting us to argue about other things that we just can't seem to get there from here.
Yeah. Kevin says Tim must have children or grandchildren.
Yeah, not just my kids, but all of our kids are, and everything's unraveling with the climate system so quickly that it's really us. It's all of us who are going to be running out of pension when the financial system collapsed because we can't grow food around the equator because the ocean circulation just shut down, which it's on track to do in the next decade or two. And I think, and I plan to be alive in the next decade or two. So, yeah, we're going to be seeing major shifts in our lives within a few years. It's going to happen as soon as we have like 1 million to 2 million death count over an extreme weather event because of these heat domes or because of these superstorms that nobody's talking about. Yeah. Anyway, it's really a question of, do we want to run to authoritarianism, who are going to tell us a reality that they can barely hold on to as things fall apart, or do we want to steer this inevitable revolution in actually democratic direction, where we all have a kind of popular opinion about how to create this world that we live in? Like, we don't have to just sit and watch things fall apart. And should we make an announcement about the designing the revolution? And there's a conference this weekend that talks about exactly this. How, like, what are we going to do?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about different events in I'd say let's stay on topic for a little bit longer, but like if you want to start putting links in the chat, and we should think about, so it's we're at 10:30 Central Time, and I want to think about what are some. So, do we want to try to think about this Gish Gallop, for instance? Maybe I think we could do a debate if we wanted to about anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, but it might actually make a lot of sense to try, since we watched the McCormick video and we watched the thing about Gish Gallop, maybe it would be good actually to think about a debate, to come back to degrowth on a debate, or and to see, like, would you want me to try to be McCormick again, Gish Galloping, and to see if you could maybe pin me down somehow? Do we want, and maybe what we could do is think of it as a debate lab. By the way, Kevin was saying, should I just keep putting in stents or try to save the earth? So, so maybe, do you have a preference on what we debate tonight, Tim?
It's all related to me, the economy, our material footprint, the way we live our lives, social justice, and global economy. Or global.
Do you want to try to? Do we want to try to do something around the McCormick's arguments in some way, or do you want?
I put the link to our analysis, our demand analysis of his Gish Gallop. That's that spreadsheet that I put into the private chat.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's what that is. Okay, cool.
So we can look at.
Yeah, do you want to take a look at this with the group a little bit and share this a bit? This is kind of
fun. You can kind of give a taste for what we're doing.
And what was I going to say else? Well, I guess this is good for now. So we started just kind of like laying out some different things, and so we put down best arguments against and best arguments for.
Can you freeze the row 1 so we can see the
yeah
header?
great idea.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, if he would have answered my question, we may have gotten to global equity between the core economies in the global north that are sort of creating wealth and thriving at the expense of the what's called periphery economies of the global south, where we're still plundering and extracting cheap labor and material resources that feed our economy and keep this whole economic growth going. This is a fantasy, and it happens at the expense of others. But we couldn't get there because he didn't even want to talk about scientists anticipating that we're going to hit 2 degrees next decade.
Well, so let's look at this and let's think about what was his best argument against you. And for everybody who's watching right now, words of arguments, these are his exact words. And then we thought about what is the best argument for.
In the case of, in the column best arguments for, is that us like summarizing his argument?
Something, no, or that would be the best argument for agreeing with him.
Yeah.
Or the best argument against would be the best argument in disagreeing with him.
Or could we also say the best evidence for?
Yeah, and
agreeing?
Kevin's saying he didn't know the answer to your question. How do we know that?
He kind of answered the question like briefly, like, and then pivoted and then started talking about everything else that he wanted to talk about. Like as soon as he registered what the question was about, you could see his face shift and say, okay, I got it. I know what I'm supposed to talk about. He had a whole thing planned for the climate question.
Right, it's like a political creature.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so yeah, and I know since GDP does not account for ecological negatives such as air pollution, like greenhouse gases, why is it that no matter what Republican or Democrat, everybody wants unlimited growth on a finite planet that is driving the climate emergency? So that's you.
Yeah, in a nutshell, that's the question.
Yeah, and then he jumps in and says there's always going to be an emergency, whether a war or climate change or whatever it is you call it. And then he mentions Creature from Jekyll Island, which he talks about the Federal Reserve. And then, so like for instance, if we look just on this page, what arguments do you notice that he's making?
Seems like he's belittling the question, saying that we've got so many emergencies, whatever. This could be a war, which, by the way, like, why do we always have war? I think it's part of our story that we have enemies and we have to go and liberate countries, or we have to fight for democracy. And so, I question that first point he makes, but that's the framing, right? Like it's a violent place. We need to protect ourselves, but we don't want to go overboard. And as an example, the Jekyll Island book just seems like he's arguing for small government, like governments figuring out how to use emergencies to spend more than it should. So it's just an interesting narrative that he's spinning. And then he says, my favorite, the climate change idea. Because later he agrees that there is climate change, but he doesn't agree on the source. But to start off, it's just like, it's an idea, or it's become a religion. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So now if we're going to take one of these, like for instance, like what if, let's just kind of start a debate lab here. What if he comes to you and he says, this climate change idea, which has kind of become a religion, has been used as an excuse to overspend dramatically, where you can spend $1 trillion on greenhouse gases. And let's see how that worked, by the way.
What is he blaming the
so what's the best argument for his point? Well, no. Is he arguing for the national debt? He's saying where you can spend $1 trillion on greenhouse gases, and let's see how that worked, by the way.
I mean, if we spent $1 trillion reducing or fighting greenhouse gases, that would be pretty significant. But so far, we've only had the Inflation Reduction Act, and for every dollar that we spend on green tech transition to a clean economy, we still fund dirty energy by $30 to $60, depending on how you look at it. We haven't even started really to make a fight against greenhouse gases.
So I'm hearing that. I'll argue one of his points. So what? Isn't it important to keep the economy going and not care about, like, I care about the environment, but we have to keep the economy going. Otherwise, what's going to happen is everything's going to fall apart. We'll lose our influence in the world and we'll become a third world country. And feel free to time out here, and because it's a debate lab, or to step right into it.
Oh yeah, it's been a long day. But if I'm following you, you're saying that his argument is we don't want to slow down the economy. We need the economy to be strong in the world, or otherwise we're going to lose our influence and end up losing our way of life. Is that?
Well, yeah, losing our way of life, whether that's the oil dollar or whether that's something else.
Kevin says we need that money for war.
Yeah, and Kevin also says he didn't answer your question, and he says everything going so well.
I asked him again the second time he came on to C-SPAN's Washington Journal recently, in the form of a tweet on X.
Yeah,
I sent him a direct question that sort of brought up the GDP thing and the growth thing again. And really, it comes down to the economy is driving the climate. So it's a great argument to make, and it's one that you will not win, as we saw in the Doha debate. It's the economy is literally killing us. Why? Because the economy requires material inputs to feed the economy, to keep GDP going. Remember, GDP is a metric that measures all of the production and the goods and the services that we make in a year. All that is strongly coupled to material consumption. And we have overshot the planet's ability to provide materials into the economy since 2002 or 4 or something. Like every year we're living on the balance of material, this beautiful planet's capacity to provide materials to the economy, as opposed to just on the renewable, durable principle. So we've been overshooting for decades. And the problem with that, besides losing a planet, like if everybody consumed, there's so many problems with that, both from a fairness standpoint, because whose economy are we talking about? Well, if everybody lived and consumed like the United States, we would need 4 more planets. And that is tied to the fact that if everybody does, so if we define what is a fair and equitable material consumption around the world, that metric would be 8 tons of stuff consumed per person per year. And the United States consumes 5 times that much, almost 5 times that much. And so if we're talking about fairness, that like we need to degrow or cool down our economy so we could get closer to that 8 tons per capita average, or fair, equitable average. And this is not just what's fair, but what fits into the planet's budget of being able to provide materials.
I'm hearing here that you're comparing how much of materials each nation uses. Now, if I was debating from McCormick's point of view, wouldn't I say, well, we can take whatever we want? What's to say that we can't take that? But then I would also, if I was debating his side, I would also, yeah, I'm going to start with that one.
Okay, yeah. So if you believe in fairness, then you would have a problem right away. But if you believe in this sort of competitive world and you have to take what you need to survive, then I guess I would say then you're okay with creating poverty in the global south. You're literally holding half the world's population down under your boot because it's the peripheral economy of the global south that feeds all these materials and cheap labor, which capitalism has always required. It inherited this pathology from colonialism back in the days when white people were going around the world taking over whole countries in what they called the frontier economies to bring back the goods to Europe. I mean, the United States learned that lesson with the indigenous, the settler colonialism that we had in this country. That's our origin story. And we've never looked back. We've just inherited it and taken it for granted that it's a eat or get eaten world. And that's the world that we create, but it's not in any way aligned with human values. And there's more of us who don't think that that's very popular, who nobody voted for ecological and social breakdown. But that's what we're getting under the current economic fantasy of growth. And you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, so and I see Kevin says so true, and now we are here. Yes. So I'm hearing all that. Now, I have some ideas of what a Representative McCormick might say. What do you think? What do you think he's going to try to press you on at this point? What do you think he's most likely to press you on? I've got some ideas, and if you're in the audience, feel free to throw out some ideas of what you think McCormick's best arguments would be.
I think we heard some of them when he talked about our standing in the world. This is a classic pattern of empire managers where they claim the mantle of victimhood. They say, if we don't stand strong, we're going to get run over. But have you ever known our biggest enemy during the Cold War was communism, right? The USSR. But has the USSR ever invaded a democratically elected country and helped a military regime become the installed leader, like basically a dictatorship, who was favorable to Western trade negotiations. And I mean, the United States has done that several dozen times around the world. The history books are wide open for anybody to look. It's well documented.
Right. Well, yeah, I think somebody might argue, right, that like, for instance, right, there have been Soviet dictatorships that haven't worked out so great for civil liberties
in their own countries.
Right?
Yeah, Stalin. Yeah.
Right. Or like look at like Romania or somebody like a nation like that.
Yeah.
But what? But okay. But what you're arguing here, just to clarify, is rather that capitalist countries have exploited other economies through trade practices, and that has been economic authoritarianism. Perhaps the only time William F. Buckley has said much of anything I've ever agreed upon was about the Koch brothers. He called them anarcho-totalitarians. And I wonder if there's some anarcho-totalitarianism in the trade policies you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the pattern is divide and conquer, tell stories that get people all riled up against each other, and let them fight it out while you and the people with the money and the power sneak away and let these conflicts make them a lot of money.
Okay, so now, I hear that. Now, if I was Representative McCormick, how would I try to press you? What do you think?
I mean, besides denying this, like belittling the amount of carbon that we're worried about, like 0.04%.
So yeah, so lying about the amount of carbon and undercounting it, or under imagining it to be smaller than it is.
Yeah, and we can talk
instead
about
instead of exaggerating it, understating it.
That's what I would prefer to argue, like the science, because I know more about that. I'm not so big on geopolitics. Like you mentioned a good point about the horrible things, the ways in which the USSR has treated their perimeter states, like what did you say, Croatia, or I mean they have.
I was talking about Romania, yeah. But
yeah. I mean there has been bad behavior on both sides, but I don't think they've always been anti-imperialism, and I think, and there's something that about communism that has been given, or even socialism, that has been given a kind of a really negative story, a reputation by the public narrative here, and I'm not quite very politically minded, but what little I have studied sort of the beginnings of communism, I'm talking about like Leninism and Marxism, like it was intended to be about community and about taking like an economy of care.
Yeah.
As opposed to a competitive economy that we have that seems to be all about
now
serving the few.
I'm not opposed to getting into this, but like keeping an eye to the theme that we're working on right now.
What would he say? Yeah.
And just because we want to wrap up in a little bit too. Not that I don't mind going longer, but I'm just thinking like, one thing that I would see him, that he would want to keep pressing you in, if I thought of something where he's going to try to press you over and over and over again, I think he's going to keep trying to talk about the destruction of civilization and try to talk about, like, if you're getting rid of all this growth, does that mean that things that are being upheld by certain economic systems start getting taken out? Right.
Oh, that would be so good. Yes.
And right, like, and he's going to keep going for that in different way. Like, he's going to like if you try to avoid him on it, if he's smart, he's going to come back and try to find a different way into it.
I would totally be down with that train of thought, because these alternative economies have already been figured out. There's whole policy platforms that we could hear if we gave third-party candidates in the presidential elections coming up a fair hearing. If we heard Claudia de la Cruz's platform or Cornel West, but really the socialists and the Green parties have got this anti-capitalist alternative. Like, let's just go ahead and let it die because it's already struggling. It's a fantasy to keep up this idea, this mythology of growth. It's killing us. And because all that material consumption is strongly tied to emissions, and there's no decoupling the emissions part of this economic growth. So we're literally putting so much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere still today, even though we've almost doubled it. We've practically doubled pre-industrial carbon in the atmosphere. That when the Earth's climate system catches up, when it balances with temperature changes, and ocean circulation shutdown and melting of the polar ice caps, and the methane escaping in the tundra permafrost of all of the tundra landscapes throughout Russia and Canada, things are going to be so hot that we will half the planet will be uninhabitable. And what is that going to do to the economy?
So
in our lifetime.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, and maybe this is a good place to leave it for now, is I hear you pointing out that that if he's going to say that not having this, that you need this growth in order to keep things going, you're saying, well, couldn't I translate that into the ecological output so that people could imagine what kind of ecological results that each increase of growth might have?
Yes, some parts of the world need to grow to raise their standard of living, and they should. And they have some of their fair share of the carbon budget left, if there even is a carbon budget left. I mean, there's so much carbon in the atmosphere that I feel like there should be zero carbon budget left, but whatever. What we really could do is reorganize the economy to not need economic growth. There is enough for 10 billion people on the planet, even though there's only 8. The models say that we could have sufficiency and everybody's needs being met. We could do this transition without anybody getting hurt by redistributing what we have fairly. And yes, people might not have a second mansion or a second yacht, but you know what? They didn't need it anyway. They're caught in this psychopathic, materialistic loop of never enough. We could totally bust that myth with therapy and mental health counseling, and they'll be better for it. We'll all be better for it if we can dematerialize our sense of well-being in the world. Can you imagine that? Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I can. And yes, we can do this. If you've lost everything, like I have, you rise from the ashes and realize, oh, I didn't need it after all.
So yeah, so you're saying that you could, that if you rethink things a little bit, you might not mind such a notion of degrowth, and maybe that's a good place to leave it for now. But we'll be continuing this conversation. As always, for folks in the audience, by the way, you can always check out the Google form that helps us plan what we're going to be bringing to this group. So,
and did you put some of those links in?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, let me put this.
I put them in a private chat for some reason. I don't have. Oh, I think I needed to put them in over on the Facebook side.
I see
in the audience. But there's 3 links that could set you up on a path to learn about degrowth and the problems with the current economy.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can come back and sort of use some of those segments as evidence to look at in the next show or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and also, and yeah, Kevin says you're not the only one. I put a link in here, so y'all can y'all are welcome to take a look at this. Let me pull this up again. As I was showing this a little bit earlier today. These are different things here. Articles, time to start watching the video, or a paragraph, the paragraph range. So you can suggest things and add things to this. Also, again, feel free to visit our website, Code Rever, check out our events, like our programming event on Thursday, or donate to our GoFundMe. Anything else from you, Tim?
Yeah, that form you were just sharing, there's fields that you can add, like whole links and what topic that you want to look at, and then all that survey builds a results kind of analysis, and we can just see what you're interested in, and what is it? It's kind of like a tool for us to just help people get the most from their time spent in this kind of co-learning and laboratory.
Yeah, it gives us a sense to see what people are interested in, so we can look at like what are people's top interests. It also gives us a chance, if you put an article in, we're going to try to look at like if you put an argument in there, we're going to try to look at what the best argument is against it. What is that the best argument you can make for it too? Could you make a better argument for it? So we want to look at those things too, so that when people suggest articles to us, we can actually come in and know what the whole landscape is, so we can give you some perspective on it, and so that people can consider all the different points of view in a debate.
Oh, and I just wanted to make an announcement that
oh yeah, go ahead.
All this debating is for good reason. If we're going to change the system, and this system change is going to come around through nonviolent democratic decision making, like citizen assemblies, and just engaging in political discourse, so that we can make hard decisions together as a people, with good information. All this practice could be leading towards getting organized as a society who is engaged in having a vision for the future where we have and can secure a livable planet, because nobody else is doing it. And one conference this weekend that is all about that is, there's a link. I don't know if you've been
let me see.
I think it was the last one in there. The
R21C.
Yeah. R21 stands for Revolution in the 21st Century, R21C. And this is the latest. It's basically a series of speakers, guest speakers, And the theme for the conference, it's this Saturday and Sunday in the afternoons. It's based in London, but it's sort of evenings and afternoons in London and mornings and afternoons here on the East Coast. But yeah, I would check out that resource for some interesting pre-organizing of, it's all around like there's a revolution coming because of system breakdown that it's inevitable. We can't stop how much greenhouse gases are coming. We can't stop the big divide in the cost of living crisis or the biodiversity loss crisis. But what we can do is get organized for true democratically deciding the kind of future we want as things change, and try to steer things in a direction that's pro our social values and pro maintaining the environment, and stop, killing nature, which is only in turn killing us because we get everything from nature, right? So we have to reorganize our relationship with ourselves, each other, and the natural world, which is what the conference is about in so many words. Yes, our better stories are waiting for us to reach for them together, but we have to get organized. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, check it out this weekend.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We'd love to know how that is for folks. And a number of us will be there. We might even be doing some different. We'll see how things go. But we might put out some stuff. And
this is an international thing, right? So this would be the U.S. version of this movement.
Yeah. And by the way, on Thursday we'll have a code lab at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, and on Sunday we're going to be having another pitch-in. We may or may not go live stream. We may just prepare for the next Wednesday, but we'll be back here in a week. Anything else from you, Tim?
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure to unpack some of these debate topics with you and the audience. Thank you so much for all your participation.
Thank you too. Yeah, this has been real good. Folks in the audience, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We have 30 people in the audience tonight.
What?
Yeah.
So late.
Apparently we're getting a lot of them from Twitter.
Shouldn't people be sleeping right now? It's almost midnight.
Yeah. Kevin says blessed. Well, we'll take it. Thank you. Yeah, we feel blessed. I feel blessed too. Very grateful to be here with you both, and to be here with everybody who's been here, including Samir, and all the folks on Twitter. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Night, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next time.